Today we're going to be talking about composting in the garden, and I'm Bob Tritten, a district horticulturalist with Michigan State University Extension in southeast Michigan, and we're in my home garden, and I've been composting now for close to 25 years in the garden, and I have lots of experience in active composting. And active composting is a method of using the plant materials that I get from my garden and my landscape and eventually turning what is considered to be plant waste into good usable soil. Composting is really gaining in popularity again as gardening is gaining in popularity as well here in the late 2008, 2010 or so period. Composting, I think, is one of the simplest things to do. You do have to work at it at some times of the year, and I'll kind of lay out the steps. What we're looking at here are a series of bins, and I'll work our way through these bins as I talk about composting, but this is the raw material. This is what we start with in the compost pile. I like to use a variety of things in my compost pile, and I think if I hit on any theme for today, it's going to be variety. It really matters in the compost pile. So what goes into a compost pile? And by the way, 2 months ago, it's now early to mid-July, and early in the season this compost is essentially, this whole bin is empty, and you can see how much material I've accumulated. I start with kitchen scraps, and we probably dump a couple of these buckets into the compost pile a week, simply from the kitchen, and usually that happens year-round. It doesn't matter spring, summer, winter, or fall, that I generate a fair amount of material right from the kitchen. Other materials that can go into a compost pile, these are simply parts of plants that I've deadheaded from my flower garden. And you notice that when I'm putting these materials into a compost pile, I'm trying to spread them out the best I can, and I'll talk a little bit about layering in just a minute. Here's another group of flowers that I've just cut from my hosta that are finished for the year, and some other onion-related plants from my garden. And again, I'm simply dumping those on top, spreading them out best I can. Another material that you can use in a compost pile is coffee grounds. And I stopped at the coffee shop a little bit earlier in the week, and they simply have bags of used coffee grounds. Now these are a little bit wet right now, but they'll dry out really nicely this week, and will compost very well. One of the things that I don't put in the compost pile, they would include meat scraps from the house, no bones or any parts of a animal. I prefer not to use pine cones. I find that they don't compost very well, so I simply stay away from cones in the compost pile. I generally don't put any kind of wood in the compost pile. It would take maybe 3 or 4 more years for this wood to break down and to become effective compost. So those are some of the things that I don't put in the compost pile. The process is rather simple. When I have a little bit more of a layer of plant material, usually I'll take a compost fork, and I'll talk about these in just a minute, and I'll go over and I'll get a little bit of compost from a couple of years ago, and I'll simply spread that on top. And this I'll do about every week or so during the season. This layering effect is really the secret to good high quality compost. Sometimes I also take some topsoil that I have a little pile next to my compost pile here, and I'll take a little topsoil that I've accumulated, and I'll just sprinkle that over the top as well. The real secret to composting is this layering effect, and you can see that the ending effect of this layering that's taking place in this compost pile. Slowly over the summer, as worms work away in here, earthworms and red roundworms, this compost will simply decompose, and the pile will keep getting smaller as I continue to add material. So that's the steps involved in composting throughout the season.